Hello, friends. You have reached the Occasional Podcast, Season 7, Episode 6. It's a bit of a twofer this time. In this episode, we give you the last two interviews recorded at Expona 2022, which includes both Romain Vet from Focal Naim and Bes Nievera from Music Direct. Romain gives us all the latest updates from Focal and Naim, the big company, including the new move to release several new products in either categories they haven't been in a while or categories they haven't been in at all. Bes from Music Direct has been a member of the Audiophile community for as long as I can possibly remember. With over 40 years of experience doing sales of audiophile products, the man has a wealth of information, and he shares his experience being a veteran in this industry, along with a lot of great stories, tips, and tricks with us. So I think it's a great listen if you stay tuned for that one as well. And coming up very soon, we have two great opportunities from the Part-Time Audiophile Network. Mark Phillips is going to join us to give us his recap from the high-end show in Munich that he just got back from. And also, we have the PTA Buyer's Guide, and we will have some updates on that as well. We've got a great show for you today, and it's a bit of a long one, so we're going to get straight to it. As we say, on with the show. Here we go. Today's episode is brought to you by Musical Surroundings. For over 30 years, Musical Surroundings has distributed high-performance analog playback equipment to vinyl enthusiasts and music lovers throughout the United States. Based in Oakland, California, Musical Surroundings represents world-class brands like Clear Audio, Hanna, DS Audio, and their own line of Musical Surroundings phono preamplifiers. To learn more about the exceptional turntables, cartridges, and analog accessories they offer, visit musicalsurroundings.com. That's musicalsurroundings.com. Today's episode is brought to you by WellPleasedAV. Importer Mark Sosa has hand-selected a remarkable collection of high-performance brands like Inuas, QLN, Marison, Qualiton, Gigawatt, and more. Each of these specialist manufacturers are driven by engineering products that communicate the lifeblood of music. Check out everything WellPleasedAV has to offer by visiting www.wellpleasedav.com. That's www.wellpleasedav.com. Thanks for joining us, everybody, from all the way across from France. Focal Naim, Romain Vet. Thanks for joining us on the show. How are you feeling today?
Thank you. I'm feeling really well. The show is really good with a lot of attendees.
Yes, we're at the this is being recorded at the Expona show in Chicago, and it has been, the energy I feel like has been quite palatable. It's a good show, and it's really good to see people face to face. I think it's just been kind of fun. How's your vibe been at the show? Has it been good to see people? Have you done a lot of traveling in the last couple of years?
So no, during the last couple of years, unfortunately, we were obliged to slow down because of the pandemic. But I think that for the last 2 months, we restarted to travel, and it's really nice to finally see our customers and our partners. I think it's really important to have a direct contact instead to have a Teams meeting every time. So, and we can see that today with Expona because many customers are here to just see what we launched during the last 2 years, because finally all the launch have been done virtually.
Yeah. So we'll get to more kind of what you guys have going on in this space a little later. But I wanted to ask you, I want to kick it off with kind of just a quick history of Focal Naim as a brand, as a corporate structure. What have you guys been up to, and how did you guys come to get to where you are right now?
So Focal is a 43 years old brand now, created by Jacques Mahul. And in 2011, the idea was to find an electronics brand which can drive our speakers properly with the quality we wanted. So Focal was looking for the electronics brands, and they found Naim, a British company, an historical electronics company as well, really high-end. And at that time, it was a good opportunity for both brands to create the Vervent Group as the mother company. And Focal bought Naim in 2011. So it was a great wedding between two European high-end brands. And since 2011, we see a big growth and interest for both brands, which work perfectly together.
What do you kind of think is the biggest learning that you guys have done in the past 10 years? You have two brands. You are one of the very few juggernauts in this industry that produce multiple brands in a large sea of people, of small mom and pop garage shops. What do you kind of think is the learnings that you have seen over the past 10 years?
First of all, because it's two historical brands, the idea was to keep the image of each brand independently. So we keep Naim as Naim and Focal as Focal. And we never wanted to change the image of both brands and keep the same strategy and line for both brands independently. So after in 10 years, for sure, the market changes and our customer changes as well. We developed new products on both brands as well. On Naim, for example, we developed some all-in-one speakers with the Muso. We developed the Unity line, which are all integrated amplifiers with preamplifier and streaming. And on the Focal side, we developed new market between the custom integration and the headphones. So finally, we adapt our market and our products to the market and the request our customers were waiting from us.
That's a really great point, because I have had a chance to listen to the Unity series extensively, and the all-in-one is a perfect example of this kind of adaptation where you bring high-end audio, like truly high-end audio, in my opinion, into a more mainstream box, right? So it's the box is smaller, it looks good, there's a LED on the screen. These are all things that, weren't around 20, 30 years ago, and now we have this kind of high-end thing in a smaller package as living spaces unfortunately get smaller for a lot of people, or just the compactness, because not every room has the capability to house these huge, beautiful amplifiers, obviously, that the Naim brand has been known for. So, I mean, I think that's really great. Yeah, a really good example of that.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, because people want to control their music with app, they want to stream also their music. We all know the vinyl is now part of our life, but when you have an all-in-one speaker in a room and a Unity in another room, you can control everything with your smartphone and play high-end music on high-end products. So it's how the market, I think, change in the last 10 years between the vinyl who came back and the streaming platform who grew a lot. So two different sources, but as important as the other one.
So in terms of the future for you guys, what does the brand have any kind of lofty goals in terms of just the corporate direction or where you might want to go? What does the future of audio look like for the brand?
So it's a tricky question, because of course we have a lot of plan. We already have a product plan for the next 5 years.
Wow!
And even if the next 5 years can change, we will certainly adapt this product plan. But we have some really exciting products that I can't wait to see them in the market, because I think that it will be really interesting to see what will be the answer from the market when we will arrive with those products. But again, we will try to continue to listen to the market and develop products based on all the feedback we receive. We receive during exhibition like today, because this is finally the way for us to learn about the market, to learn about the request our customers are waiting from us. So our product plan is clearly based on all those feedbacks and based also on the new technologies that we can find now, between the streamings, between the wireless, between the preamplifiers technologies that we can see, etc., etc. So this is how we developed our products plan and how we develop all the products we launch. It's clearly based on what we discovered from the market.
As a corporate brand, from a top-looking down view, what are some of the ways that you receive feedback from your products? Do you go? Is social an element to that? Is it private groups of listening groups? What are the ways that you receive feedback on your products and that you said might alter the way you choose to launch the things in the next 5 years?
As you know, we have different markets. We have the hi-fi market, we have the headphones market, the custom integration market, the car audio market, the professional market. On each different, I would say, business unit or each different products categories, we have partners. And we really often use our partners to try our speakers, to try our products, to try our amplifiers before we launch them. It really depends because we can use professional on the studio monitors products, for example.
Right.
We will use some sound engineer to get their feedbacks to make sure that where we are going is a good direction.
Right.
But we will never launch a product if we are not sure 100% that it will be the good product. We did some mistake in the past, and we learned about these mistakes. So even if it was hard at that time, today it's really useful because we know what we have to do to make sure that the products we will launch will receive a good feedback. But yes, we always use panels of people who will try your products.
We've done a lot of podcasts before on the British sound, the Brit hi-fi. Does the French, this is obviously for Focal, does the French audio culture have a sound to it? In a generic sense, what do you kind of feel like your sonic goals are with the French brand, and do they differ, or how do they differ among the different brands that you propagate?
So I'm not a big fan to compare the different sound signature based on countries because I think it's really depends on the company who will develop the product. Really often talk about the British sound, about the American sound, about the French sound. I would say for us at Focal, we are looking for the purity of the sound, we are looking of the clarity, we are looking of the sound stage, of the details, more than a sound signature. And the most important for us is to be sure that when our customers will listen to music on our product, they will have all the details and they will listen to the music at the same level that the sound engineers who did the mix wanted to see his track listened.
So let's talk a little bit more about that, because you guys, we haven't really talked about this, but not only do you guys take care of the Focal and the name brands, but Focal also does a lot of production type gear. They make a great pair of monitors where studio musicians in the studio will listen for a very, I would assume, flat or sound. How does, from a corporate standpoint, do you approach the sound between the professional market, which makes music, and the audiophile market, which consumes the music?
It's a good question. First of all, at Focal, we have the R&D department with dedicated engineers who will work on dedicated products. The good thing is they will all work together at the end, and that's the reason why you will find the same materials or technology in the different products. So, for example, our studio monitor will use beryllium tweeter or aluminum magnesium. They will use flax or W cone. You will find the same technology in our hi-fi speakers or in the car audio speakers or the headphones. So this is the first point. The second point is when we develop a studio monitor, we develop a tool for the sound engineer. When we develop an hi-fi speakers, we develop products for pleasure, for final customer who want to listen to music. And I would say it's a different way to develop products because one is a tool, the other one is clearly pleasure, even if you can take pleasure with the studio monitor. But at the end, because it's a tool, we don't have the same criteria when we develop them than when we develop an hi-fi speakers. And then in terms of sound, I would say you always have the stereo image. So the sound stage can be different, some dynamic, some different frequency response could be different, but at the end, the most important part is to make sure that we will have the more detailed sound and the biggest sound stage to make sure that you will provide the best rendering for each music.
I really like that answer because I think that as audiophiles, we value the soundstage. There's a huge amount of value to a great soundstage, and that's not necessarily the biggest concern for someone who's monitoring something in the studio. It's important, but I just feel, I have a hunch that the soundstage is more important to an audiophile, where I think maybe correctness and frequency response or something more tool-like for mixing and mastering is important. I'm sure the soundstage is important there, but like the value of soundstage for an audiophile speaker is very hefty. If I go into like one of the showrooms that we're at right now, and the soundstage is just holographic and laid out, it's a wow factor, right? And of course, our resident mastering engineer Dave McNair has often said that the mere fact that there's a monitor and a desk stuck in between the two speakers dramatically affects the capabilities of the soundstage in terms of what's even possible, because we have this obstacle in the soundstage itself. It's part of that. It's like the fact that you can have a soundstage that's deeper, wider, and so forth, and the speakers can be farther back, and you can have a whole room kind of thing going. That I find that's an interesting point that really hasn't been brought up on this show very often. So that's very cool. The brands both have been evolving over the years, and they have branched out in their own unique way. I think one of the things that was kind of interesting a few years back was that Focal decided to get into the high-end personal audio space. They started making these really nice high-end headphones, and I feel like you guys went all out, because the first one was the Utopia. The price point was on the high end at the time. There are some more expensive ones now, but I had a chance to be one of the first people to review that thing, and I got to tell you, I was like, whoa, this is a player in the field. This is 110% from R&D, from a design standpoint. It wasn't just like something that was kind of thrown out there. It looked like it had a lot of effort and time and energy spent on it. What made you guys want to get into that space for the Focal brand?
So, in fact, the Utopia headphones was not our first headphones.
The first high-end headphone. Yes,
exactly. But and in fact, so it's not to correct you, but it's really important, because the Spirit one that we launched in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, was the first headphone Focal launch, and it was more a commercial headphones. And Focal clearly discovered this market with these headphones. The sound was really good, but the way to build an headphones, it's not the same way to build an hi-fi speakers. When you have an hi-fi speakers, you put it somewhere in your home and you don't touch anymore. When you have an headphones, you will take it, you will put in your hand, you will put in your bag. You have many different things that you have to think before to develop an headphones. You need to make sure that it will be compatible for a lot of people, depending on the shape of your head. You need to make sure that the driver will have the same kind of directivity based on your ear, to make sure that you will have the best sound as possible. And it's really important, because the Spirit one for us has been a big laboratory and helped a lot to develop the Utopia. It was not the same technology, of course, because with the Spirit one it was an electrodynamic headphones, but with the Utopia we arrived with what we really know at Focal. We arrived with a big driver we used in our hi-fi speakers, but using Twitter material. So that's the reason why Utopia was really interesting to develop. It's because we use the material we normally use in a Twitter, but to provide the complete frequency response. And the reason why Focal wanted to develop headphones, it's because we had hi-fi speakers, we had car audio speakers, we already had some custom integration speaker, we had studio monitors, and we are thinking, okay, so we have all the products to listen to music almost everywhere, except when you want to travel, and that's the reason why we wanted to go there. We said, maybe it could be a good time for us to go in this market. And at the beginning I was talking about some mistake with what we learned. Spirit One was one of them, which helped us to develop for us one of the best headphones in the market, Utopia. And since 2016 now, we launch different kind of high-end headphones, and I touch wood, but they all have been a great success, because we arrived with our own technology, we arrived with what we know how to do since 42 years now. So it's really important for us, and this is why also I said that we need feedback from the market, and we develop products based on those feedbacks and based on different people who will help us to understand better what is looking the market. And yes, the Utopia headphones, the ear headphones that we launched at the same time, have been two great success for us. And since we launched these headphones in 2016, we never stopped to have success with the headphones we launched after. I'm thinking about Clear Magnesium now. I'm thinking about Celesty, which was our first high-end close-back headphones. So yeah, we want to continue this market. When we arrived with the studio monitor, it has been a good success. It was the same on the car audio market. We have the custom integration now, where we arrive with a complete line of products. So the idea is to make sure that when we will arrive in a new market, we will have a good success. We are not just here to develop products and see if it will work or not. No, we are here to make sure that when we will arrive in a new market, we will arrive with good products and we will receive a great success. At the end, it's the image of the brand, and we want to keep this high-end image that Focal and all the employees who work since the last 42 years work for.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know to a lot of listeners that may seem like such a given that that approach seems like, oh, it seems so common sense. But I would just like to offer an item of contrast to that, where we have companies that they often will go to market and just see what happens. It's not that everyone wants to do a good product, but the preparedness of your products when they hit the market. A lot of heads touched it. A lot of heads heard it, and a lot of prep, and it comes out so pristine. But we do have product manufacturers in this space who have more of like a throw it against the wall and see if it sticks attitude, and both work. But it's just really good to see like a nice polished approach. And like I said, I think the Utopia is a good example of that, when you decide to do a new price point and the thing comes out and it's not a miss. Like the sound was not a miss, and I think that does happen, unfortunately, not very often, but it does. But it was just like kind of like, wow, this is what we're doing. And you're right, use beryllium drivers in that case, and you guys stick to not always, but a lot of the materials that but you tend to reorient them to their application. So I find that a very admirable trait in a lot of ways. Recently, we did a couple of news releases about Naim and how they got into the turntable space after quite some time. What kind of conjured up that exploration, and how's it been going so far with the turntable?
So we launched Solstice last year, if I'm not mistaken, and clearly we were asking from our customers a turntable for a really long time. Naim partner with Clear Audio, who is a really high-end brand for the turntable market, to develop our Solstice turntable. It's a limited quantity turntable because we had only 50 turntables in USA, and as soon as we communicate on it, they have been all sold in 5 minutes, which has been crazy. We are thinking, or we always have the door open to see what we do, if we will continue to develop turntable or not. But for the moment, clearly Solstice received a really, really good feedback. We will continue with this limited edition Solstice, because we didn't deliver all of them, and we are still building them. It takes time, especially right now with everything happen in the world. But again, the door is open. Let's see what we will do in the future in the products category.
I'm always fascinated by the idea of the audiophile to the professional and how that contrast kind of takes place. Who do you find is easier to market towards, the audiophile market or the professional production market? Do your tactics, obviously your media buy would be different, but do your tactics in a way differ in any major way? Or are they kind of approached like two sides of the same coin?
The approach is different, but we always love to do the link between our different markets. So for example, we started 2 years ago a project called the Focal Artist, the mixed on Focal. We have some engineers who develop or who mix music based on our studio monitor. And we use that to create the Mixed on Focal playlist. So it's the third one that we will launch in the next 2 weeks now. The idea is to finally use what we are doing on the pro market for the home market. So the playlist we will provide, it's all tracks mixed on focal that our customers can use at home to listen to their speaker, to their focal speakers. So listen to music which have been mixed on focal studio monitor. I think it's an interesting concept because finally we are at the creation of the music to listening to the music at home or in your headphones. It's an interesting thing that we can link both markets because finally for me I think it's link. We have all the legitimacy to do this link because we are on both markets. So the playlist mixed on focal, it's a good example to demonstrate our speakers, to listen to music mixed on the focal studio monitor at home, and finally to improve the music which have been made by a sound engineer and by an artist at the beginning of the story of the track of the album.
Romain, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian.
Today's episode is also brought to you by one of the originals in high-end audio, Purist Audio Designs. Purist Audio Design made the first fluid-shielded audio cable over 35 years ago and still makes them today right here in the US. For over 35 years, Purist Audio has connected you to the music. They passionately make high-end, high-crafted audio cables designed specifically to the needs of your system. They list their specs, such as resistance and shield quality, and you can find them at PURISTAUDIODESIGNG.com. Purist Audio Designed is veteran-owned and available worldwide. Today's episode is also sponsored by SCHIIT Audio. SCHIIT Audio designs and builds audio components in California and Texas. Based in Valencia and Corpus Christi, their wide line of amps, DACs, and audio accessories fit any budget, starting at $49. For a full rundown of all their products, visit SCHIITdotCOM or stop by their retail store in Old Newhall, just north of Los Angeles. That's SCHIIT.com. Bes Nievera. Bes Nievera? Bes Nievera.
Honored.
It's a little tricky for me because I'm terrible.
Well, just all you have to do is just soften the S in Bes, and you've got it, and it runs real smooth. And then all you have to say in simple tones, Nievera. It's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Nievera. One thing that's not hard to pronounce is the amount of time and experience this gentleman has in the audio industry. He's been a fixture as long as I've been in it. I've always enjoyed the videos, the content you produce, and of course, we met early on when you were still doing music direct as a sales rep, which you continue to do today, but your role has evolved over the years. But just to give you kind of a resume too, you started the whole journey in 1981. Which obviously you guys can do the math faster than I can, is quite a long time in the industry. 21 years at Music Direct doing what we did. And also, I think I would be remiss not to say your jazz show that you hosted at WDCB Jazz, 21 years on the air. Bes, thank you for joining us. I can't wait to kind of talk about your audio journey and what you've been up to. But, just kind of looking back over the whole thing, your whole experience, what do you kind of think was the first thing that sparked your interest in audio, if you can remember that far back? I mean, it was...
That's almost too easy. It's basically my father's stereo back in the day. He really didn't blossom into becoming an audiophile until he started following some of his friends' paths and ultimately went to stereo shops here in Illinois and so forth. And my fondest recollection was him coming home with a Macintosh amplifier and preamp. He had a Thorens TD-124 turntable at the time.
Good taste. Good taste.
Yeah, so great electronics. And then, of course, the speakers were the Altec Lansing Valencias, these big Bloomin' speakers and just great full-range sound. So that's basically where the DNA for me as a enthusiast and as a music lover really started to take shape. But you talk about my career in 1981. I was 18 years old when this whole business began. And I think one of the things that I looked forward to in those days was, number one, I was never a salesman. I was kind of shy, but also a ham. I was doing theater in high school, a little bit of college at that point. But to be able to adapt into an environment where I was surrounded by gear that I would just lust, drool, be a kid in a candy store kind of attitude back in those days. All you could do was just learn from the experience, get the training, and above all, listen to the equipment that really set the standard for what it is that we're doing today in talking audio and home theater and all of its connected technologies. So a lot learned in those days.
I guess one of the questions I ask a lot is how was audio different back in 81 when you started than where we are today? Do you think that things are the best they've ever sounded, or do you feel like, man, there's some vintage pieces out there that will just blow your mind now that we have, like, if you put a really good a pair of speakers in front of them? Are amps better, or are amps is good better back then, and now we just have better speakers?
Oh gosh, that's a very broad brushstroke of a question, but simply put, the gear of the 1980s and the gear of the 2022s are a wonderful amalgam of lessons learned from many of those manufacturers of that era to where we are moment, in enjoying gear that we pursue. In those days, this is again the 1980s, I was selling Kenwood, Pioneer, Hitachi, Techniques, the early days of the Techniques brands and so forth. We had a very high, rich proportion of turntables from some of those many manufacturers, including some that have gone, the way of the dodo, like Dual, but actually they're coming back. And tape decks. But I was also surrounded by 19 to 32 inch cathode ray television sets and speakers like Bose and Advent, and as well as store-bought brands, because I was working for a chain of stores known as Pacific Stereo in that era. Fast forward to where we are now, where consumers will go to places like Best Buy or the subset like Magnolia, as well as my competitors, including Audio Advice and Audio Advisor and Elusive Disc, Acoustic Sounds, and my place at Music Direct. The marketplace is 10 times more dynamic. We have more product variances and more technology-driven opportunities for customers like you and I to listen to music and or content with a much better sense of sound quality. Gone are the cheaper transistor amplifiers and designs, and in its place are more tried and true technologies such as Class A, Class AB, and newer technologies like D, G, and the like. And I think where we are as users of these products, we're able to listen to a lot more music with a lot more minutia than ever before. But you did ask about people liking and lusting after vintage equipment. My gut reaction is have at it. If it makes you happy, if it sounds good, we shouldn't disturb that that passion. I think you deserve to listen to the music on the gear that you wish, even if it's a pair of speakers you bought over at a rummage sale, and you finished up the cabinet and you fired them up and you said, "Yep, that's Zeppelin." That's I think that's your cup of tea, and you should have it.
We dissect so much about the gear, but again, I think it comes down to your experience. And if you get your jiggles from what you got, then don't let other people tell you what you should have, I think, is the main takeaway. But yeah. So you've been selling audio gear since the very beginning then, right? Right out of high school?
Straight out of high school. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
How did the radio station thing come about? How did you begin to be the host for the jazz show?
Well, I was already going after my major in arts and media management at Columbia College Chicago, and one of the classes I had chosen to take was board op. But ironically, I've been doing board op stuff since my high school radio station days, and briefly in some freelance work at other radio stations in the Chicago area. So when the teacher at that moment, the late Christine Moran, approached me. She said, "You've done this." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Do you want to, credit me out? That's fine. I don't care." Next thing I know, she is putting me in front of the station's program director or general manager at the time for WDCB, Mary Pat LaRue. And within weeks, I was on the air. And that started a broadcast love affair that was included everything from regular weekday morning drive, midday, afternoon drive, to overnights, to weekends, emceeing events, including my first ever audio show where I was, this would be Hi-Fi 99 at the Palmer House, Chicago, in the Red Lacquer Room, where I introduced I shouldn't call her up and coming. I think she was already destined for greatness. I introduced Patricia Barber for the first time on stage.
Right.
And that was in itself a stage fright worthy experience, because my stomach was in knots, and this room was loaded with humans. And I said, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bes Nievera with 90.9 FM WDCB. Thunderous applause, smiling, looking straight into the Kliegel light as opposed to, the audience, and trying to tell myself, "You're not nervous. It's okay." I did my spiel where I had to, introduce all the people, and I finally said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome premonition recording artist Miss Patricia Barber." Audience applauds. I race down the stage, go down a hall, go to our Music Direct booth where we were still selling records in a 10 by 10 space, go behind the curtain, fall to the floor, and curl up like a ball because my stomach was so cramping. And Jim Davis, the owner of the company, comes into the booth, goes to the back, and says, "You okay, Bes?" I'm like, "I just need water." So that plus emceeing events over at the Chicago Jazz Festival, the Hyde Park Jazz Festival, numerous events and artists that I would, MC, but also my regular radio work for lots of years. It was fun. Like anything else, there are times where you got to stop, and that's when I signed off in 2019.
So, can you just elaborate on that a little bit more? Like, what kind of made you want to move in another directions in terms of doing that? You did it for 21 years. I'm sure you felt like you had invested so much of yourself into that.
I did, and there was definitely a lot going on to parlay that celebrity of sorts. But I won't lie to you. Music Direct has been a labor of love since the very first day I joined the company in 1995. I have devoted my energies, my well-being, my customer relationships, my media relationships, including with you, Brian. But at the same token, DCB was becoming a lot more hard work. And and only once a week at that point. I was only on Sundays, Sunday mornings from 9 to noon. And that's 3 hours. You got to get up dirt early. You drive to the station. You start programming your music. You then get on the air, and and then you have to go home. The workload at Music Direct was far more dynamic. And I just simply said, to the team, I'm like, "Thanks. This has been a great ride, but I got to put her down and move on." They weren't upset. If anything, they were ecstatic over the fact that my time was going to be a memorable one, and I'm still respected whenever I, visit, the station or go to events where WDCB is the sponsor, and I get to say hello to my former colleagues, and it's been we still got the love, So.
Oh, I'm sure. It's such a labor of love in a way too. I 100% agree. It's like so much work. It's funny to me that they never went fully remote with that. I guess it's just the stream wasn't as reliable. Is there any did they in the middle of the pandemic? Did radio stations still have you come in? I suppose it's not such a big deal because you can just have one person in the studio and then one person in the boardroom. It's not such a big deal. But
From what I can understand, and mind you, the pandemic for much of Illinois began in March of 2020. And while I wasn't on the air already at that point, I already knew what people were doing. I have a number of personalities there. The main people: Leslie Caros, Paula Bella, Bruce Oscar. Those guys were already ready to work remotely. They knew exactly what to do. They had the studio sets. They had everything. So being able to program from their homes and use their home studios was easy. And that should be said for virtually any of the major market radio stations that you and I may be listening to. You can almost immediately hear the change from a designed studio to somebody sounding like they're in his or her bathroom, and which is not a bad thing, but you still have that celebrity on the radio, and that individual is doing his or her job to produce content and make people happy, just like we're doing right now.
Yeah, in Los Angeles, there was a duo that is called Kevin and Bean, or was called Kevin and Bean. And I don't know if it was announced to the audience, but I did read an article where it came out that one of the main guys, he had been doing it remote for like 3 years. But I do agree that there's a vibe to sitting in that room. I mean, I actually did some radio in college as well. Michigan State has a really nice studio in the basement of one of their dorms. Mm-hmm. And that, man, it is an intense feeling when it's like the soundproofing's right, the gear's all high end, the music sounds so good in there. It's just like it's got a lively nature to it that's very fun. But I wanted to go back to the other thing that we were talking about earlier in regards to the jazz show. We talked a lot on this show about the technical reasons why audiophiles like jazz so much. Do you think that there are any other reasons that you can think of why jazz and high-quality sound are so intertwined?
Well, it's obviously the recording quality. If you look back at the history of jazz as it went into the stereophonic age and the era of Rudy Van Gelder, Orrin Keepnews, and so many other people who shaped the sounds that we listen to today, most notably in the post-bop period and where we are in this place and time, the creation of stereo equipment and the high resolution audio of the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and now only got better. And in doing so, all the recordings that you and I love, whether it's small group recordings or big band orchestral level type stuff, gets the red carpet treatment over, say, a rock recording, because rock recordings are done on the cheap. You look at all the acts of that era versus where we are now. You don't see an audiophile Bill Haley in the Comets. You don't see, Chuck Berry. You don't see, Little Richard sounding like they were designed to be recorded on a console for perfect enjoyment. But what you do get is somebody behind the board taking a serious jam session, whether it's from Miles Davis or, in my growing up, I loved the Modern Jazz Quartet, John Coltrane, and so on and so forth. You get a sense of the aspect of the closeness of those musicians. And I think to this question, it's one of the reasons why people generally consider jazz the perfect medium to play their favorite content through systems that could be heard in showrooms, wherever you are, at an audio dealer, or in your own home, or through headphones, or even in your car. You know that there is that space, that tone quality that takes place between you and the music.
Yeah, and just to summarize kind of what our resident mastering engineer at Part-Time Audiophile, Dave McNair, has said on the subject, and that is that the instrument separation, the fact that there's a couple of instruments, only a few instruments rather, that occupy each space of the frequency spectrum allows you to further hear into all of those instruments. So like the bass, the drums, the snare, and the guitar and the vocals, they fit in these perfect little spaces, generally speaking, of course, that allow you to really just hear the quality better than a mash of the guitar wall and overproduced yada yada. There's like a sense of like a rawness, a naturalness to it that, I try to shy away from the idea that, hey, everything is like, we want to recreate the original sound of being there. That's not kind of how I stand on the subject, but I know some people, that's their goal, and that's great for their stereo systems. Because I've been in the recording studio, and I don't feel like the recording is ever reflected. It goes through too many inflection points on the way, from the microphone to this console to this and that. But I do think that when you do jazz and you do it right, there is a special sense of production that can come out of that, which just nails it. It nails it better than most of the music I was raised on, which would be like rock and amplified guitars and this kind of thing. So I do find, even though I don't believe in the absolute sound in that respect, I do think that jazz kind of does a really great job of capturing a better image of that idea.
I concur, but I would also add to that engineers like Dave McNair understand that when a performance is getting cut to tape, as it were, that we're catching them in the moment of their emotions. Mm-hmm. So if you can actually hear a double forte piano strike, if you can hear the plucking of a string on a bass, if you can hear the sort of the spitting and the resins of the saxophone as they blow into it, all those things also accelerate the sensualness of what happens when we are listening to music like that, especially if it's being played on equipment that has been engineered and manufactured to produce the most information humanly possible for you to listen to on a regular basis.
With that in mind, on kind of the direction that we've been going over the last 10, 20 years with music, where I think everybody would admit, at least in the drum section, we're leaning harder and harder on fake drums. We're leaning harder and harder on fake everything for the most sense in most modern pop music. I've even seen articles that said if you think modern music all sounds the same, it's because they're literally using the same samples, the same plugins, the same sounds to create this massive music. Where do you feel? What do you feel about that? I'm not trying to get you into trouble here.
No. This isn't about. I don't think this is a question. I don't think this is a bad question, actually, Brian. I think this is a very good question. But I'm not a musician. Okay, mm-hmm. I'm an end user. I am the person who wants to listen to Dua Lipa and Elton John or Lizzo. That's actually kind of my vibe after a long, hard day of, making people listen to great music on great gear with great content. But I also know to that point that when people are hooked on a rhythm and know that it has an ability to be struck in another way with another track by another artist, if we're listening to it and we're drawn to it, that's great. But if we're drawn to it in such a way that it becomes tedious and repetitive, then yeah, I think that creates a saturation point for those individuals and makes mm-hmm. the situation worse in terms of the expectations and the creativity of the artist who's trying to make that song or that composition work to their advantage and subsequently to our ears as we listen to it.
Yeah. I often think about this idea of the gang chorus that became so popular, where there's also this idea that there is waves of influence that kind of snap together at certain time periods. And in the 80s, there was this envelope filter for the snare drum, and you can hear it on a lot of these early Prince tracks and throughout the 80s, where everybody got obsessed about the way this snare sound worked, and it worked its way into the music, and it helps solidify a certain time period in music. And then now, for a while, I don't know if it was 5-10 years, the idea of a gang chorus is where everybody's shouting the chorus in this kind of dissonant crowd setting. It became very popular, and it helps tell the history, I think, a lot of times of what's going on at the time, like all music does, but also that it tells you what the time period you're in, that we have these commonalities. But yeah. I don't really personally, I don't judge it either one way or the other. It's just, it is what it is, and we are at this time period. So like I said, I don't really strive for the absolute sound myself in those respects, but I try to appreciate as much, but in my heart, there's certain music that I just attach myself to. But I don't try to, bend other people one way or the other. I enjoy listening to music with my wife's very eccentric taste just as much as I do with my own music. I just try to get into the energy of it all.
That's me with my eccentric music and my wife's desire to listen to Journey blasting loud in the car.
Journey's awesome. For some reason, Journey always comes into my mind too. How do you? Was Journey produced good? I don't know.
If you look at if we're going to play that card, yeah, I think they were well produced. If it wasn't for for their team of extraordinary musicians, we would not be having some of the great hits and the great albums of their long and illustrious career. But my wife loves Journey. I'm a Roxy man. You know that. I'm a Brian Ferry kind of dude. So we kind of swing differently in terms of our musical needs.
I don't know if I've told you this before, Bes, but one of my teachers in college was Branford Marsalis. And this was kind of right after he was coming out of the Tonight Show gig. And it was just like a buzz every time he'd guest teach one of my jazz classes. And we used to go down to the jazz. There's one jazz club in East Lansing, or there was at the time I was there. And we go down there, and the vibe in a jazz club is something I think unique as to maybe just a regular bar or any type of other music venue. And there are so many in Los Angeles where I live with all types of vibes. But there is just a really nice vibe about going there after school with the guys from a club and seeing them perform. And I thoroughly enjoy it. Actually, I recommend, even if you don't love jazz, to go out and check out some live music, and the vibe and the improvisation is just fantastic a lot of times.
That's cool. That's very cool.
On the subject of jazz, do you have, like, for those who aren't as familiar with this genre and are looking to get into it, do you have a couple of tracks that you think are like good starting points, jumping off points for people who wanted to get into the hobby that aren't the usual kind of like Miles or Coltrane?
It's hard to say, and the reason I say that is because I listen to music with a certain ferocity that oftentimes I forget who the hell I'm listening to. But when it comes to evergreen tracks that have really helped me shape my vision of what great sound and great jazz has been, I'll always revert back to the very first Pat Metheny group record for ECM with the formidable lineup of Lyle Mays, Dan Gottlieb, Mark Colby, and the track San Lorenzo. Downright effing great track. I'll listen to it forever. It holds me, it grips me, it keeps me in its spell. Another great track that I've always been drawn to, because I always play it at the change of seasons, because I go through a downtime where my days of listening to EDM from summer to fall starts to shift, and then I start looking for things to help me go through something that I've disclosed to other people, seasonal affective disorder. So I downshift to ambient and other things that help me maintain my peace. And one of the greatest albums of my time for me to listen to on jazz is the entire album of Bill Evans' You Must Believe in Spring from 1978, released on Warner. Elliot Zygmunt and Eddie Gomez provide an extraordinary counterpoint to Bill Evans, who at this point would be at the tail end of his long but somewhat troubled career, and still deliver a tour de force of two sides of stuff, including the Michel Legrand title track. So that certainly is a wonderful, mind-bending listening kind of experience for me.
Let me just pivot a second. We're from jazz to kind of going back to your career in terms of training and educating people. Are there any type of things that you would think you'd like audiophiles to know before they get on a call with you to talk about the nuts and bolts of any type of gear purchasing situation? What's one thing that you wish people would do more about in their research for products?
Be open. That's really the simple thing. I mean, as we said at the onset, I've been doing this for decades, and I've seen the evolution of the customer as open-minded consumer to where I am now with Music Direct, which is a very discreet group of individuals who are looking for the best pieces of equipment. And time and again, whenever I have to deal with a phone call with an individual who is very data-driven or wants to ask the tough questions about what this is supposed to do, my reaction generally is, and this isn't a slight on anybody who I've talked to over the years. Everybody gets a fair shake at this. The messaging that I try to explain to them is, are we going for specs, or are we going for your gut in being able to feel good about the equipment based on this guy or gal's design and your commitment to listen to it and to embrace it and to feel the music or the content that you listen to or watch through it? I think one of the sort of the toughest things that we have to do in our industry as retailers is being able to listen to a wide strata of individual. And as I said earlier, I've talked to everyone from 18-year-old kid who came into our office, and I gave them the tour of the place, and like, what is the one thing you want to do? Where do we want to flip a switch and say, oh my God, you hit me with what I really wanted to know? And that's kind of the mystery of what we do when we're trying to work with our customers, and whether he or she is an audiophile or just a person just needing a little handhold to move to the next place. But to your question, there's no there's no really bad person, who asks those kind of questions. There's just that person who is just trying too hard to learn something or thinks that they know too much. And you really have to sort of dial them back and kind of go, okay, if you know so much about this, that's fine. I'm not going to try to debate you. Are you comfortable with what we've talked about, though? Are you happy with what you're looking for? Have we done our job? And if they say yes, great. If not, all I can do is wish them well and move on.
This idea that you just brought up about a data-driven purchasing decision, do you feel from your experience that this is something new that has just happened with the recent advent of the internet and the communication we do on that? Or was it always something that has been a part of the sales process, do you think?
I think it's a little of both, to be truthful, Brian. I think what we see today is, in this world of YouTube videos and podcasts like yours, where people grasp onto something and latch onto it really hard and want to use that and leverage it to what it is that they are looking for. So let's say, for example, Brian listens to a podcast starring Bes. Just fictitiously, this is your show, and Bes says to Brian, after reading a commercial for XYZ soap, that I'm telling you to buy this Technics SL1200 turntable because it's the shiznit.
Mm-hmm.
Brian becomes completely enamored by that and begins his quest to buy that Technics turntable, but he doesn't even have a stereo system to put it on. Okay, so that's where some of those those moments have to be digested in what to do next, and it goes back to your earlier question about people like me. I have made it my practice to divide the gap between being a salesperson, which is how we make our money, to being a advocate for that individual. It's not me trying to close you. It's you creating a relationship with me because I'm guiding you to what works best based on your situation, your desires, your orgasmic moment of music.
Mm-hmm.
Here's that turntable for you. By the way, it's a Technics. And
oh man, how many people do you think you've spoken to about audio on the phone over the years? I mean, you've
thousands. Please.
The question I really want to ask you, Bes, is there a specific thing that drives a person to be an audiophile? Because if you say it's the love of music, I'd say, I don't know, because there's a lot of people who go to a lot of concerts and they seem to be more driven by the love of music and they don't become audiophiles. So I'm just wondering if all the people you talk to, if there is a common thread there.
Golly. No, I don't think so. I think, number one, my employer, Music Direct, is a audiophile-driven company.
Mm-hmm.
So the common thread is the people who call in are the audiophiles. Okay? But there is also an interconnected movement of newbie individuals who got their instincts to call Music Direct because they saw something or heard something or they were referred to us. And it's those individuals that you strike the new paradigm of what it is that you want to do for them and bring them into the world of being a positive force for being an audiophile. Okay? And that's, to me, the only common thread that I see. The rest of the time, the audiophile community that we deal with on a regular basis will be those individuals who've read the reviews in Stereophile or other traditional and non-traditional publications. Those are those people who are seeking the new products or ordering music on a regular basis because they saw our advertisements and other social media offers, and are drawn to the allure of getting something at a fair price through Music Direct.
Well, I gotta be honest with you. I'm one of those people because I absolutely, when I was living in Chicago and first starting to get into this hobby, Music Direct was one of the places I called, and I still see my sales rep to this day at the shows.
There you go.
I know, and it's about relationship building. It's, I think, about feeling like you have a friend on the other end of this.
Yeah,
of this
whole thing. Because we're in the end, we're all hobbyists too. but we're also passionate about our hobby of loving audio equipment and the music you listen to it to. And again, that's my message to those, to everyone I'm in contact with. We can talk about, that KT88 tube. We can talk about, what capacitor you're using. We can talk about the difference in variances and impedances to deliver more detail in your cartridge or more bass and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. But in the end, after we've done all that, sort of shaping of the person and the equipment that we're connecting with, the end result is 30, 60 days when Brian calls, my colleague in our sales department. If you felt great, you get an attaboy, and that's how that's supposed to work.
Without naming names, is there any kind of story you can tell us about the craziest call you've ever had with a customer and what went down exactly?
I get a mysterious phone call from an individual who says, I have to drop off a turntable for you that needs a little bit of love. Do you think you can take a look at it? And it's like, oh yeah, sure. I'll take a look at it. Turns out it's Billy Corgan's turntable.
Yes. He's an Illinois native. That is right.
And, so I look at his turntable. It's pretty beat up. I mean, this was a Michelle Gyro of all things. And, wow. It had a basic tone arm. The suspension was kind of, fakakta and all that sort of stuff. And I said to his assistant at the time, like, all right, so here's what we're going to do. Number one, this turntable needs a full tune-up. His tone arm's shot. I want to suggest an SME tone arm. Let's get this cartridge on here. Let's get everything up to rights. I'll do a power supply upgrade. I can promise you, the minute this thing is set up in his home, he'll be the happiest camper ever. Fast forward to when all the parts are all done, and it's time for me to present it, and so on and so forth. I get to drive up to Billy's house up in Highland Park, where he's in this gorgeous David Adler cottage on the lakefront. We say hello. Disclaimer, I wasn't a huge fan of Smashing Pumpkins at the time, so forgive me, Billy. But what we did riff on at the time was who was doing his home heating restoration. Because I'm a landlord as well, so I was focused on steam heat. That said, I set up his turntable, and he had a gorgeous system with VTL gear and all that fun stuff. 24 hours passes, and I'm at a lawn and garden shop outside picking flowers and stuff with my wife, and I get this terrifying phone call from his assistant going, I think Billy screwed up his needle. He's upset. Uh-oh. And I'm going, really? Now? Dropped the phone, told my wife, hurry up. Chop.
Billy calls. Billy calls to the Batmobile.
I raced her home, dropped off all of her plants so that she could do all her gardening stuff. I raced back to my office, get my microscope, get my toolkits, drive back up to Billy's house, and look at Billy, and Billy looks at me like, all I was doing was playing a record, and I think that needle's broken. I'm like, okay, hang on. I said, everybody out. Well, I didn't say it that way, but it basically was just like, I'm going to go look at this, Billy. Give me a few minutes. So the needle was a Lyra Helicon, I think it was, at that time. Put it under scope and noticed something really hinky. It didn't look right. But the needle, the cantilever was straight. Everything looked just the way I had dialed it in. But the diamond is gone. Boom. Sheared off. And the only thing that was left there was the main fork that a diamond tip gets mounted on, especially if it's a nude mount or other designs. I said to Billy, I'm like, Billy, what I'm about to do is give you a disclaimer that I have to say to all of our customers. There is a warranty on a cartridge against parts and against defects in workmanship, except in the case of a broken needle. However, something's not right here. I'm going to bat for you. So I temporarily installed another cartridge on there, brought the cartridge back to the office. We overnighted it to the distributor at the time. The distributor then says, what's going on here? And we made the case. And the distributor immediately said, replace it. So ultimately, we put it back on Billy's table and knock on Formica and various other wood products. Billy remains a happy camper. So, but that was one of my more interesting moments in a very long career. There's a lot of people I've talked to over time. Keith Jarrett was one. Harry Shearer is one of my regular customers. So I do talk to him from time to time, along with his wife Judith Owen. Record execs from the likes of Warner, Rhino, and the like. I tend to take care of them with their turntable issues and so on and so forth, and just regular plain folk like you and me, babe.
I'm a big fan of Billy Corgan. I'm actually a more of a fan of his music. That's my bread and butter growing up. But I will say this: he does good stuff for the Animal Society in Chicago. Yep. And I say that because I saw this fundraiser once. This blew my mind, where Billy says, "I tell you what, you pay X amount of dollars or whatever, I'll come to your house and give you a private concert in your house." And I'm like, how much is it? You know how much money you could raise like that? And it goes to some very wealthy person who has plenty of disposable income. But what a gift to be like, I'm going to leave my safety bubble and go to your house and play you a 5 to 10 song acoustic set to raise money for animals. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe that happens all the time, but it was the only time I ever saw it. And I was like, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, no,
I can't even imagine.
Billy's philanthropy in general has always been terrific. But I also saw him as a pretty cool human being when I had that that one opportunity to visit him and to talk to him, street level, not like some freaking fan or whatever. But again, sorry, Billy, okay, Melancholy, okay, good album, all right, fine. I'll tell you a little story about Harry Shearer very quickly. And Harry bought his first turntable from us. It was a tech support call that ended up being an embarrassing moment, which I won't really describe here in this broadcast, other to say, Harry, you did this. And he was utterly embarrassed. It was actually a video call. I had to do a FaceTime call with him. He ultimately apologized and said, it happens. Don't worry. Play your records. Call me later. That sort of stuff. And then, of course, the office goes up to me like, so did it go up to 11? And I'm like, really? Really? We're focusing on this? Because, and that goes to the heart of what I do when I talk to people like Harry and so forth, even if they are of that strata of entertainment or public life. I'm still going to talk to them like they're just Harry, or they're just Billy, or they're just X or Y, because I need to talk to them as if I were talking to any of them, talking to you. They need to be treated with the same level of care and respect, as opposed to me just kind of going, Principal Skinner, and that kind of feeling. So.
We did talk, we talked a little bit about turntables, and just to diverge even more, do you have any tips for turntable players? Because I feel like there's a lot of caution in your stories. Or, hey guys, you can bust a needle pretty quickly. What is one of the most common things that keeps coming in that could be easily avoided in your scenario from these service calls and such?
Not understanding the fundamentals of setting up a turntable, most notably making sure your tracking force is on cue. It's probably the only thing that I've ever had to deal with most of the customers. An excellent example of this is the plethora of inexpensive turntables that we have out there, and the messaging that, it's easy to build. You can set it up in just mere minutes. And 9 times out of 10, it turns into a cluster expletive deleted of epic proportions. And there isn't a moment where I'm doing everything from a voice call with a septuagenarian, octogenarian, or even a 20-something, where I have to listen to their concerns and try to translate it to the parts that they're talking about. So what starts out as a booby trap is turned into, so you're telling me that the arm isn't level. So you have to walk a tightrope in trying to address that kind of a headache. But to those individuals who get the messaging and are able to set up their turntables properly, it goes back to when I do my video calls with them. When they go and I look at them like, all right, show me the camera, turn to the cartridge, and like, is it okay? I'm like, dude, it's more than okay. You should be sitting back on your sofa and relaxing. So that really does give them the happy feels when something's done right. But again, it's just trying to read the instruction and translating information. I think is probably the biggest headache, second only to just making sure you got the turntable set up in terms of tracking force and anti-skate. So.
Yeah, and for those listeners who are more on the digital oriented side of things, the level, the cartridge and the needle being level is on a lot of levels, right? We're talking about left, right, up, down, tracking force. There's a lot of adjustments that the higher end turntables can do that make sure that groove sits perfectly in the groove. So important for it to sit perfectly in the groove.
Yeah, but if that person wanted to do that and is part of this broadcast, number one, I'd probably say to them, have your dealer do it, please. I mean, if you've got a setup technician in your state or your area there who is a responsible human and has all the tools like I do, including software, microscopes, you name it, that person will do the job in a reasonable period of time as opposed to you being Mr. DIYer and screwing up the needle in the first 30 minutes. That's really the story there. As would we at Music Direct, when we offer our turntables and say we will mount the cartridge, we're able to do almost 70% of the job for you. It's up to you to know the rest of the program. So,
what do you kind of make of this recent resurgence in turntables? We actually had a chance to interview on a previous podcast people who did a documentary about the rise of the turntable once again. In the wake of like the CD and so forth. And they said a lot of the surprise from doing the documentary was the fact that a lot of the people entering the field now are young women that see Crosley's on Instagram or TikTok and they're like, oh man, I want that. There's an aesthetic, there's a tactile experience there that they latch onto that I've seen firsthand for a lot of people. And it is a completely polar like a demographic, let's just say 180 from the typical audiophile record vinyl playback person. What do you make of all that? And have you seen something like that happen before in this industry?
Well, I mean, we talk about how long I've been in the industry. So the historical document that I use on a personal level is, quote unquote, the first analog death, which would be the introduction of the CD in the 1980s to where we are now. As I joined Music Direct in 1995, they were still selling turntables. In this case, I think 1 or 2 models of Rega and at least 1 or 2 models of VPI. And at one point, the project turntables were coming in. But as the market for turntables began to emerge early on in the early 2K, you started to see more and more people gravitating towards it, regardless of budget. And the demographic, whether it's the demographic of women or the older set that's sort of reviving for both nostalgic as well as for sound quality purposes, turntable criticism is a dish best served by people doing the appropriate research as to what it is that he or she wants. You want that Crosley? Fine, you have my blessing. Do you want that U-turn? Fine, you have my blessing. Do you want that Project, Music Hall, Rega, Clear Audio, VPI, Thorens, Dual, all the new turntables of the 21st century? Have at it. As long as you understand for every price point that you're spending, you're investing in a turntable that is designed to give you the kind of auditory response that you are paying for. So if it's a $900 turntable going into a $65 receiver you bought at a garage sale and it still works and you're running it with a pair of $200 ELACs or whatever, and the chemistry is there, more power to you. I'll expect to see you at a record fair or shopping for records at musicdirect.com, and keep up the good work and enjoy your music. The argument about the fact that it's a 180 for audiophiles also smacks of kind of a negative attitude, and that's kind of unfortunate. I have not watched this documentary, so please know that I'm working off of your commentary and what you're saying. But when I do talk to our customers, those people who are getting back into vinyl are doing so because they have been entrusted with something, whether it's a collection from their heirs, or they just want to see the fascination of it. And whether it's those individuals or others, what you want to do in that case is shake their hand and say, "Come on, let's go for a ride." And teach them the fundamentals of what it takes, make sure that they have a stereo system that's even qualified to run a turntable, okay? There are customers who have Sonos gear, and they just want to Bluetooth the turntable. Fine. Got 5 turntables for you. You ready?
What?
My
God.
And so on and so forth.
No, don't do that, folks. Bez, come on. Bluetooth. Do not Bluetooth the turntable. Okay.
It's happening. I'm not going to go there. We're not going to have this debate while the tape is running. I will simply tell you. I will simply tell you that, to your question, that people will want to hear vinyl. And if they have the resources, hear that word. If they have the resources to do it, and we have the equipment to offer, we're going to do it. We're going to make them listen to the music in a good, fun, enjoyable way of life.
Yeah, I don't disagree. If what you can afford is only what you got, and it is a Crosley, then celebrate music. I'm all for celebrating music. I'm celebrating quality.
That's really all that's
I'm just
that's all
say,
that's here.
If you guys listen to this podcast, I'm saying I don't endorse going out and buying a Crosley if you can afford something else. I think there's other options that for almost the same money that you can do a little better at. But that being said, is my main hang up is the one that's like the suitcase turntable where the speakers are built.
I will side with you on parts of that conversation for a number of reasons. Let's be real. When someone's buying that suitcase one, like for example, they saw at a hotel in downtown Hyde Park, or whatever, fine. You can look at that and gel on it, and then you look at the records that are in the hotel room, and you're kind of going, man, these look like coasters, and it's a dreadful feeling. And even when I go to those hotels and spend a weekend with my wife, or if I'm out on business, I'm kind of looking and I'm kind of going, well, this is an interesting social phenomenon. Okay, boy, I'll have to tell room service to get a new replacement needle. It's that kind of thing. But also, again, to positively spin on what you've just said, okay? Inexpensive turntables are that. They are inexpensive turntables based on the value of what's going on and that person's record collection, okay? That demographic likes that suitcase. We can say to them, I'm like, okay, but maybe it's time for us to talk you into something a little bit different. You mind following me, and listening to my argument? And if all goes well, great, have fun. If not, please play that Crosley. But it's not without a fight. You have to sort of look at him and go, I don't know. The Crosley, I'm not keen on it at the moment. Again, no disrespect to Crosley. These are opinions. They have sold a bazillion products in their since the brand relaunched or the category relaunched for them. They've even gone as far as making conventional turntables. I actually walked into a record shop in Crown Point, Indiana, and lo and behold, there was a Crosley that looked like a regular turntable. Quality tone arm, factory mounted cartridge, no silly little plastic this or that. And it's priced competitively in the $2 to $3.99 range. So they're out for bear, to get that kind of snap up that kind of consumer. But as I said earlier, you look at the Regas, you look at the music halls, you look at the projects. Hell, you look at the MoFi turntables, in the price points under $1,000 all the way up to $2,500 retail. Those are turntables that are the result of good build quality. But it also is the story of a table that, because of that build quality, elicits more music from the grooves. That person will hear what it is that he or she is listening to. Will they hear that out of a Crosley with speakers that are 3x5 in a suitcase that's made mostly of cheap MDF and plastic? I don't know, babe. I don't know.
I always like to bring up the point that, listen, the speakers are creating massive vibration through the cabinet of the turntable.
Yeah, but they're jamming out. They're jamming out to the tune. So that's the part you got to give them the pass.
I bring this up so often on the podcast, but I'll say it one more time. My wife just listens to it through this tinny Alexa speaker, and I guarantee you she's happier listening to her tunes than I am critically listening to like a lot of tracks that I do my stuff with.
Dude,
so she wins.
For what it's worth, I she's playing something on Alexa, and my first reaction is, honey, that's not the Four Tops version I grew up with. Is this a remix? Yeah, are they synthesizing the stereo track so it sounds like a simulated stereo? This is no.
I actually, one thing I was just thinking about, that we're at an actual audio show right now doing this, and there is this reel-to-reel room that's always does reel-to-reel, United Home Audio, and I encourage anyone who sits down and really wants to focus on like going back to the technology that was, and the technology that kind of made this things change the most during a short time period where we're kind of like changing how we do things. I for all of our talk of turntables and analog, I just encourage those people who, you get joy out of whatever it is, or you're looking to get a little more sound quality to help hype up your enjoyment. There is a thing when you listen to a reel-to-reel in the United Home Audio room, like here at the audio show we're at right now, and you hear like a second daughter recording of the Beatles, and it's just exploding from the speakers with a texture that you've never heard before. Not like it's colored, just in like you're listening to a lost time. Like it's different. It is a unique experience, and there's just so much to be gotten. And so I guess my point for that whole story is that there's just a lot of different ways to enjoy the sonic tapestry that you create, and you don't have to give up on it if you're like, oh well, I'm frustrated with my system, or if I want this, or if I want that specific thing. There is always something a little more to like tinker with. Which I think this makes this hobby really great. To like fine tune to your heart's delight, but at the same time, don't let it be a source of negativity for you. Like you said, hey, look to it, be happy, tweak, fine tune. But don't sit there and like let it frustrate you if you're feeling that way about it.
Otherwise, you're not a hobbyist; you're an obsessive, and I don't think that is the best category to define the type of individual who calls him or herself an audiophile. I think the audiophile is seeking the best quest for their musical journey, and also through the equipment that we listen to it on, and with an evergreen format like Open Reel. I think one of those things that we get out of it is, as you said, it's dynamically more information, but it also, as you just observed in your hands and your up in the air, it's like, I can't believe I'm listening to this. And that's where we really need to strike the balance in what it is that we do when we are listening to equipment, or when I'm doing my job, endorsing a piece of equipment based on that person's love of it, as it were.
As we kind of wrap it up here, I wanted to ask you what you thought one of the biggest misconceptions that you get when you take these phone calls, that people come in with preconceived notions about something. What is one of the things that you find yourself course correcting the most in educating your clients? Or do you just stay away from it all? I mean,
truthfully, that's what I do. And not because that your question is a bad question. I don't want to badmouth anyone. I can't. It's not in my nature. What I do want to do is make sure that when that individual is attempting to assert themselves in a way that suggests I'm in the wrong on something, my response is, okay, I'm human. Let's find out where I think I made the mistake or whatever, and let's hammer it out together. Do you feel that my suggestion of this cartridge was bad because it made your system sound shrill? Fine. Let's find the cause, and go from there. But to try to say, hey, Bes, I'm smarter than you. I'm like, well, yeah, maybe you are. If you are, I would maybe this phone call, I'll actually learn from you and say to you, you know what? I didn't know that. It's possible. It's totally possible.
Do you have a favorite tweeter material?
Soft dome. No. Silk. Definitely not metal. I although, as you know, at Music Direct, we sell a ton of loudspeakers, more than I've ever seen in my long career with the company. So I'm grateful for the diversity of products that are out there. And there are and we sell a lot of great loudspeakers. But your question is a personal one, so I'm going to answer it on a personal level, not professionally. Well, I'm not a huge fan of metal drivers simply because they really actually hurt my hearing. They ring, and it's not something I'm a fan of. What I am a fan of is horn-loaded drivers, and depending upon the compression driver technology, it's not so much that they're making a comeback, thank you JBL, Klipsch, and others, but rather when it's designed right, the diffusion, the overall detail that I get out of it, far better than I expected. As I said jokingly, is also truthful. I like a good silk dome tweeter. If it's done right, the energy and the detail that you get out of it in the high frequency ranges, along with the crossover to the mid bass and the mid-range driver and the main bass driver, you really are able to see things and hear things in a more three-dimensional kind of way.
I'm actually quite surprised about how the Silk Dome tweeter scales, because like you can find a Silk Dome in a very inexpensive piece, but you find Silk all the way up there. I mean, you find it in some shockingly expensive stuff. So it's not like at some price point all of a sudden folded ribbon tweeters take over. It's like Which goes to the point of where we're seeing some of the latest trends in loudspeaker design. The return of the EMIT tweeter, the Heil style tweeter of eons ago. That's a great technology, but what's happening here is that that those tweeters are getting tweaked in such a way that, in some cases, it's overkill. It's taking away some of the luster of the rest of the driver and crossover configuration. But again, personal opinion, not trying to stoke a fire in the industry that I love and will always support and embrace because of the customer base that I support and the many fanatics who love knowing about what we do and what we listen to. Well, Bes, I can just say thank you for all of us who know you in the industry for being an ambassador, for just celebrating the joyfulness of gear and music.
It's been a trip. I wouldn't change anything for the world. Brian, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to sit here and riff with you. Let's do it again.
Sounds good, man. Thanks.
You're welcome.
The Occasional Podcast is a production of the Part-Time Audiophile Network, which includes PartTimeAudiophile.com, The Occasional Magazine, the PTA Newsletter, and Audiohead.com. You can stay in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The Occasional Podcast is produced and hosted by Brian Hunter, executive produced by Scott Hall at PTA Productions. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Occasional Podcast on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.